Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well on this beautiful Monday morning. Thank you for tuning in again to another session of Manna in the Morning. I apologize for the amount of time that it's been since our last video. But now that we are gathered here, I wanted to offer a scripture to you all for your reflection and meditation as you go throughout your week. And this will be from the Book of Esther, chapter 4. When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer: "Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai: "Go gather together all of the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me, and do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do, and when this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish." So Mordecai went away and carried out all of Esther's instructions. This is a really powerful passage that not only shows the courage of Esther to be able to rise to the occasion during dire times, which required her to take drastic measures to ensure that she was able to save her and her people, but it's also a conversation about the relationship between God's sovereignty and human responsibility. And in the Book of Esther, there's many people who have drawn attention to the fact that the word God is not mentioned. And oftentimes in those books, it might be a little bit more difficult to see where God is moving and how God is acting among the people. But in fact, I think Esther is a very theologically rich text because it shows the reality of what our daily lives are like living as human beings. Oftentimes having to see God's power and God's movement behind the scenes in our daily interactions, or when it comes to the decisions that we're forced to make. And in this passage, I think it's really powerful because Esther herself is recognizing that there is work and then there is steps and measures that need to be taken for her to ensure the safety of her people. But she's also willing to do that despite the threats against her life, despite the fact that it is unlawful to go and address the king in the way that she ultimately does. So in this passage, Esther is showing that God's sovereignty and God's ability to work and to restore God's people is always present, as it always has been. But for God to be able to work within us and amongst our community, that necessitates our responsibility and our taking responsibility to be able to fight and speak on behalf of the least of these, of the poor, of the dispossessed, of people who are under threat from royal or kingly powers on this earth. So in this passage, Esther and Mordecai, as we see, many of you may be familiar with the progression of the book. This is a perfect story and passage that really shows what it means to not only have courage in the face of likely persecution, but to rise to the occasion during times which are inherently difficult. The verse where it says, "And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" I think that passage can apply to the Christian life as a whole. When we're called into action, or we're called to rise to certain occasions, and fate often rarely chooses us during moments of our choosing. So to be able to rise to that, and now what we see happening right now in the post COVID world, or in the midst of the COVID-19 and the pandemic, which has been unfolding over the past few months, many of us are going to be pushed to situations where we're going to have to ask ourselves, or other people are going to ask us to rise to certain occasions to meet a certain need. Because there's undoubtedly millions of people, not only who are unemployed, but who are suffering, who have food insecurity, in addition to the food insecurity that they have already had, who have economic instability, who are unsure where their next paycheck is going to come, who know that their stimulus checks can't cover the needed resources for them and their loved ones. So there's many questions that are going to be arising, if they haven't already arisen already, about how we are going to rise to the call as Christians, as believers, and as people of faith, to work on behalf of God, to know that God is sovereign and God is all powerful, but that God requires us to do the laborious work on the ground, grassroots level to ensure that we are taking care of God's people in the way they need to be taken care of. So these are all thoughts that I pray and I wish that we can have on our mind as we go throughout our weeks and figure out where God is calling us and what occasion it is, or what occasion may be on the horizon that we ourselves will have to rise to. So thank you, beloved, for tuning in to this session of Manna in the Morning. God bless you. May God bless you and keep you. And I'll see you again soon. Bye now.